We were at dinner with friends. One of those casual Friday things where everyone pretends their lives are better than they are. She laughed a little too hard at Mark's joke. Not because it was funny, but because he wasn't me. Her hand brushed his arm. I noticed. So did everyone else. But no one said a word. That was my job, right? To smile. To play along. She leaned over to grab her wine, barely glancing at me, and said under her breath, but just loud enough. You're just convenient. Not exciting. No one else heard it. But I did. And that was enough. I didn't react. No flash of anger. No embarrassed laugh. Just silence. Because in that moment, something clicked, sharp and final. Like a lock turning from the inside. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. Not directly, but in the way she treated me. Like background noise. Like utility. But now the words had a shape. Now they had a weapon's edge. So I sat through the rest of dinner like a ghost. Smiled when I had to. Nodded at stories I wasn't hearing. And the whole time, I was replaying that line in my head. Convenient. I drove us home in silence. She scrolled through her phone. Laughed at a meme. Not once did she look at me. We got home. She went straight to the bedroom. Kicked off her shoes. Turned on some show. I stood in the hallway. Watching her. She looked up finally. You're acting weird. I didn't respond. Just walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood there for a long time. Not thinking. Calculating. Because here's the thing. She thought I wouldn't leave. She thought I was too quiet to be dangerous. Too steady to be a threat. Too loyal to ever disappear. She was wrong. That night, I lay next to her in bed. She curled away from me, as usual. But I didn't reach out. Didn't say goodnight. Didn't breathe too loud. I stared at the ceiling and let the cold settle in. Not just in the room. In me. She was asleep before I blinked. That's how safe she felt. But tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd start fading. Not with noise. Not with drama. With silence. With distance. With surgical detachment. She'd said I was convenient. Soon she'd find out what life feels like without convenience. And by the time she realized something was gone, I'd be too far to follow. 2 days later, I got a text from Josh, an old college friend turned quiet observer in our lives. We hadn't talked in weeks, but he sent a single message. You should have seen the way she looked at him last Friday. No context. No explanation. Just that. I stared at it longer than I should have. The words didn't surprise me. They confirmed what I had already started to feel, that this wasn't just boredom. It was drift. Emotional, maybe more. But drift with intention. I didn't reply, because something had already shifted in me, and every new piece of the puzzle now fit into a larger pattern. Her phone flipped screen down every time I walked in. Her sudden new password. The late-night showers. The notifications she always dismissed with a quick swipe. Convenient. She'd called me. Like a hotel room she could return to after wandering. That night, she came home late from drinks with coworkers. Her hair was different, windblown, undone. Her perfume stronger than usual. I was on the couch reading, TV on mute. She paused when she saw me. You're still up? I nodded once. No emotion. She kicked off her heels, walked past me without touching, without asking anything. The bedroom door shut behind her like punctuation. 10 minutes later, I heard her laugh softly through the wall. Phone call. Muffled. Personal. I didn't press my ear against the door. I didn't try to hear the name. I didn't need to. Josh's message had already written the rest. The next morning, I didn't wait for her to wake up. I showered, dressed, and left early. Left no note. Left no breakfast. The silence between us was now a language, and I was becoming fluent. At work, I pulled up the bank statements. Compared timelines. Grocery runs that didn't line up. Late-night Ubers that ended nowhere near her sister's place. Still, I said nothing. Because men like me, we don't confront until the trap is set. We observe. We prepare. That evening, I changed my routine. Went for a run. Long, purposeful. Didn't answer her, where are you? Text until I was already home. Out. That was all she got. She stared at me that night, like she couldn't figure out what changed. Like she could feel something slipping but couldn't name it yet. That's how it begins. You stop reacting. You stop asking. You stop being predictable. And when predictability dies, so does her control. She rolled toward me in bed. Barely touched my arm. I didn't flinch. Didn't move closer. I just lay there. Still. Quiet. Fully awake. Because from that night forward, I wasn't her husband. I was her shadow. Watching. Calculating. Waiting for her to confirm what I already knew. She thought I'd never leave. But I had already started packing. just not in suitcases. In silence. In strategy. In certainty. I waited until she was asleep, the kind of deep sleep that comes after 2 glasses of wine and a guiltless conscience. Her phone sat face down on the nightstand, buzzing once, then again. She never used to sleep through her notifications. I picked it up without hesitation. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just clarity. No password. She must have forgotten I was the one who set it up last year. The lock screen lit up. Hey, that pic you sent, damn. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I opened the photo gallery instead. Recent. Hidden album. Screenshots. One of them was a dinner receipt. 2 entrees. 1 cocktail. 1 whiskey. A location downtown we'd never been to together. Date stamped 2 weeks ago. Another photo. Her in the mirror, soft lighting, lips parted slightly. Caption, miss me? Still, I said nothing. I locked the phone and set it back exactly where I found it. She stirred, turned over, muttered something about work. I watched her for a moment. The shape of someone I used to love, now unfamiliar. The next day, I called the bank. No confrontation, just quiet requests. Separate statements. Deactivate secondary card. Change mailing address for notifications. They didn't ask questions. I didn't explain. That weekend, she asked if I wanted to go see her parents. I told her I had plans. I didn't. Instead, I spent those hours scanning old receipts, photos, message logs I'd long ignored. It was all there. The gaps. The late nights. The sudden energy she had for errands that used to drain her. She wasn't sloppy. Just confident I'd never look. That was her mistake. I started backing things up. Files, records, evidence. Not to use. Just to have. Shadow work. She came home that evening, tossed her purse on the counter, smiled like nothing had happened. Want to order Thai? I said I already ate. She stared at me, slightly tilted head, like trying to read something on a foggy window. I didn't offer more. Because what do you say when you're sleeping beside someone who thinks they're winning? Nothing. You let them feel the comfort. Let them think the silence is acceptance. That the stillness is surrender. I spent that night in the guest room. She didn't ask why. The next morning, she said nothing. No questions. No protest. She just poured her coffee and scrolled her phone like the absence of conversation was routine. Maybe for her it was. But for me, it was momentum. Each day, I pulled away a fraction more. Each hour, she lost access. Not to my phone, not to my money, to me. And the irony? She hadn't noticed she was losing yet. But I had. I was tracking every inch she gave away. Not to punish. To prepare. It started with a Friday. She texted me around 5. Dinner tonight. I didn't respond. Instead, I took the long way home. Drove out past the city limits. Parked near the cliffs where the signal cuts out and sat in silence. No music. No calls. Just the sound of my breath and the steady hum of distance growing between us. When I returned 3 hours later, the house was quiet. No lights on. Her car still in the driveway. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, scrolling her phone. When I walked in, she glanced up like I was a stranger arriving late. You didn't answer, she said flatly. I nodded, took off my jacket, hung it up. She waited for more. None came. That night, I turned off my phone before bed. Something I'd never done in 8 years. She noticed. Her eyes flicked toward it on the dresser, then back to me. Everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine, I said. And that was it. The next morning, I was gone before she woke. Took my gym bag, but didn't go to the gym. I drove to a quiet co-working space downtown, signed up for a weekend pass, and sat with my laptop open, pretending to work. What I was really doing was moving pieces, rerouting automatic payments, redirecting mail, setting up a P.O. box, a shadow version of my life, building quietly beside the one she thought I still lived in. She called me around noon, then again at 3, left a message around 5. Nothing urgent, just her voice laced with a question she didn't know how to ask. That night, I didn't come home. Checked into a cheap hotel, clean, quiet, anonymous. Didn't even turn on the TV. I just lay there in bed, phone off, the city buzzing outside, and for the first time in months, I felt weightless. She texted again around midnight. Where are you? Call me. Seriously, this isn't funny. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't about being funny. It was about reminding her that I wasn't on a leash. That my presence wasn't guaranteed. She had built her comfort on the assumption that I'd always be available. That no matter how cold she became, I'd still orbit around her warmth, or the memory of it. But I had shifted. Quietly. Fully. The next morning, I returned like nothing happened. Showered. Changed clothes. Made coffee. She stood in the doorway watching me like she'd missed a chapter. You just disappeared. I stirred my coffee. I needed space. She waited. Expected more. An apology. A breakdown. Something she could react to. But I gave her nothing. Because men like me don't vanish out of emotion. We vanish out of strategy. And when we come back, it's not to reconnect. It's to observe. To measure how much quieter the world is without us. She thought the silence was a phase. But for me, it was practice. I never said his name out loud. Not to her. Not to myself. But I knew it. Found it buried in the metadata of a photo she thought she had deleted. A reflection in the window behind her. One man. One mistake. His name was Drew. Finance consultant. Drives a Tesla. Divorced once. Likes bourbon neat and women who pretend they're unavailable. They weren't smart. Not really. Just careful enough to think no one was watching. But I wasn't watching. I was recording. A week after the first disappearance, I started digging. Business filings. Side ventures. One LLC led to another. A trail of money just visible enough for someone who knew where to look. He'd been consulting for a startup that ran a little too close to fraud. Not criminal. Not yet. But enough to make his firm nervous if someone made the right call. I didn't blackmail him. I didn't threaten. I just slipped the file into the right inbox. An anonymous tip. Subject line. Might want to look into your boy. No return address. No fingerprints. By the following Thursday, his name disappeared from their website. I saw it in real time, one refresh, and he was gone. She noticed. I saw it in the tension behind her eyes that night when she got home. The way she checked her phone more than usual. The way she looked through me like trying to decode what I knew. I didn't blink. Because here's the thing about men like Drew. They gamble on women who won't cost them anything. But she had already cost me too much. So I made her expensive. Not to destroy him. I didn't care enough. But I wanted her to feel it. The shift in air, the weight of consequence. Not from my voice. From the silence that followed. She paced the kitchen that night, half-heartedly making dinner, glancing toward the hallway every few minutes like she expected a knock or a call or a breakdown that never came. Nothing did. Because I wasn't reacting. I was repositioning. She tried small talk over pasta. I let her speak. Nodded once or twice. Didn't add anything. She said she might need help with her car insurance. I said, that's not my lane anymore. Simple. Clean. That night, she didn't come to bed until after I was asleep. Or pretending to be. She was unraveling now, not from confrontation, but from the absence of one. Because silence makes people nervous. It fills the space where excuses used to live. And every time she looked at me now, I knew what she was really asking. What do you know? But I never answered. Because some truths are louder when they're never spoken. And some moves only land when she doesn't see your hand until it's already played. She always thrived in company. Knew how to control a room, steer a conversation, laugh just loud enough to draw eyes without making it seem forced. She built her social circle like a fortress, curated dinners, double dates, book clubs she never read for. They didn't see her flaws, only the version she projected. Smart, composed, loyal. I never tried to ruin that image. I just let it wear itself out. It started subtly. I pulled back from the couples we used to meet with. Declined group dinners. Skipped the Saturday brunches. When they asked, she told them I was just tired lately. When they asked me, I said, just needed space to breathe. I wasn't rude. I was quiet, controlled, focused. Then came her friend Melanie's birthday. A big night. Wine bar, 20 people, all our usuals. I showed up late. Alone. She was already there, holding court, laughing in that way that's just a little too loud when she wants to be seen. She spotted me across the room, surprised. I nodded, walked to the bar, ordered neat whiskey, and didn't join her table. Instead, I sat with her coworkers, people she rarely mentioned. I kept the conversation light, let them do the talking. Turns out, Emily had been venting to them. Long hours, cold husband, growing distance. What she didn't know is that one of them, a guy named Troy, liked to overshare when he drank. And that night, he did. He leaned in halfway through his second cocktail and said, honestly, man, I think she's going through something. She's been acting different. We all thought you two were solid. But lately, it's like she's trying too hard. You know? I smiled. Took a sip. Said nothing. At the end of the night, she approached me near the coat check. Her voice dropped low. Why'd you sit with them? They were more honest, I said. Then I left. The next week, she started getting calls from mutual friends. Nothing dramatic. Just space. Cancellations. Delayed plans. People weren't accusing. They were distancing. Not from gossip, but from discomfort. She started noticing. The second shift came at her job. A quiet rumor made its way through HR. A client had mentioned seeing her having dinner with a man, not me. It wasn't reported, just noted. She came home that night restless, phone in hand, pacing like the walls were closing in. She asked if I said something to anyone. I shook my head. I haven't spoken. At all. Because that was the point. I didn't burn her world. I let it dim, slowly, until even she couldn't pretend it was lit. Because the worst kind of isolation isn't being abandoned. It's being quietly excluded by people who once believed in you. By the second weekend, the silence wasn't just between us, it was in everything around her. Group chats slowed. Brunches got canceled. Even her sister, who used to call every other day, started letting her texts sit unread for hours. She felt it. Not because anyone confronted her, but because no one did. The house got quieter. Not peaceful, just hollow. She'd walk into a room, then walk right back out. Turn on the TV, then mute it 5 minutes later. Sit at the kitchen table with her laptop open, doing nothing. I still moved the same. Wake, gym, coffee, office, garage, sleep. We were in the same space, but no longer in the same rhythm. And that was the point. I didn't need to disappear physically. I just had to exit emotionally. And she was finally starting to realize the difference. Monday night, she stood in the doorway of the den while I read. No words, just her watching me, like waiting for permission to speak. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. That moment said everything. Because when someone who once had all your attention now has none, it's louder than shouting. She tried gestures. Cooking dinner. Leaving my favorite whiskey on the table. Folding my laundry. I thanked her. Nothing more. She wasn't used to effort being noticed, but not rewarded. She brought up a weekend getaway. I said I already had plans. Which was true. I'd booked a solo hiking trip. Something I hadn't done since before we met. Just me, trees, and a signal-free zone. She looked surprised. Like she forgot I had a life before her. That night, I watched her from the back porch. She stood in the living room, staring at a framed photo of us from 3 years ago. Smiling, laughing. Different people. She wiped the dust from the glass, then put it face down. The next morning, I found it in the trash. I didn't ask why, because I already knew. She couldn't stand the version of me that didn't orbit around her anymore. And she hated the fact that this new version wasn't angry, just distant. Functional. Self-contained. There's a specific kind of power in being present but unavailable. It doesn't scream. It doesn't fight. It simply leaves the door open and waits for them to realize they're not invited in. And when they do, they don't cry. They scramble, trying to claw back the version of you they took for granted, only to find he's not waiting in the dark. He's already moved toward the light. And he's not looking back. She finally snapped on a Thursday. It wasn't loud, not at first. Just tension folding in on itself. I walked through the door after work, still holding my gym bag, when she blocked the hallway. Eyes sharp, arms folded. Can we talk? I nodded, walked past her, set my bag down. Saturday. She stood. I didn't offer her a seat. She started with, I don't know what's going on anymore. But she did. That's the thing. She just didn't like what it looked like from the outside. The silence, the change in tone, the growing space between us. I waited. She paced, then threw out every card she hadn't played. You've changed. We used to be a team. I don't know who you are anymore. But I hadn't changed. I'd returned to the version of myself before I was deluded. I told her that calmly, and that's when she flinched, because it was the first time I acknowledged the shift without trying to soothe it. She said I was being cold. I told her I was being clear. She asked if I even wanted this marriage anymore. I said, I wanted a partner, not a performance. Her voice cracked then, just a little. She sat across from me, hands trembling, eyes searching my face for softness. There wasn't any left. Because once a man stops begging for emotional scraps, he stops blinking when they cry. She whispered, so this is it? I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. She took that as a verdict. The days that followed were heavy in the way that air feels before a thunderstorm. She moved slower, spoke less, watched me like a stranger. and I didn't adjust to her discomfort. I let her feel it. Let her sit in the space she'd hollowed out long ago, back when every ignored touch and half-hearted reply seemed harmless. Now the echo hit her back, because silence, when it finally speaks, is deafening. I didn't gloat, didn't lean into bitterness. I kept to my schedule, read my books, slept soundly. She tried to reintroduce old habits. Late-night wine, shared meals, sudden compliments. But they bounced off, not because I hated her, but because I didn't need her validation anymore. The intimacy she once rationed, I'd already buried it. And what she didn't understand was this. I wasn't punishing her. I was preserving myself. Because the most final kind of departure isn't when someone walks out. It's when they stay, but stop showing up. And now, she was talking to a man she couldn't read anymore. A man who'd already stepped off the emotional battlefield, leaving her alone with all the weapons she no longer knew how to use. It didn't crumble all at once. That's not how real collapse happens. It starts in whispers, not explosions. She was late to work 2 days in a row. Her manager called twice. The second time, she let it ring. I heard her on the phone with her mother that night. Her voice was low, brittle. "She's worried about you," her mom said. I only knew because she didn't bother to close the door. By the third week, her smile became a shadow. People noticed. A friend from her office stopped by while I was in the garage. I watched through the slats of the blinds as they stood on the porch. Her friend leaned in and said something. She shook her head, defensive. Then the friend stepped back with that look people give when they've seen too much. Whatever version of her she used to show the world, it was cracking. And the thing is, I wasn't even involved anymore. Her unraveling wasn't my responsibility. I wasn't the one withdrawing affection. I wasn't the one who left needs unmet. I had simply stopped covering for her. I didn't shield her from the weight of her choices anymore. At a small dinner we attended, mutual friends, she tried to play the old part. Smiles, light touches on my arm, a laugh that rang just a little too loud. But I wasn't mirroring it. I was polite, measured, distant. After dinner, one of the wives pulled her aside. I caught a piece of it in the hallway. "You used to light up when you walked into a room. What happened to that?" Her reply was soft, defeated. "I don't know." But she did. And worse, now so did everyone else. The social illusion cracked. She was no longer the put-together, adored wife. She was the woman who lost her grip, quietly, publicly. At home, the silence between us was no longer awkward. It was understood. She didn't try to fill it with small talk anymore. She cooked less, stopped pretending to care which show I watched. Sometimes I'd walk in and find her just sitting, eyes blank, staring into nothing. And yet, I felt no triumph. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about walking, away from the version of myself that begged, away from the man who offered softness to someone who met it with stone. Now, I carried my peace like armor. Her collapse was visible, but it wasn't loud. That's what made it real. The performance had stopped. The audience had left. And all that remained was the woman in the mirror, and the echo of the man she thought would always be there. I didn't pack loudly. No zippers yanked. No drawers slammed. I moved through the room like someone folding up a chapter. Quiet. Exact. Nothing dramatic. Just the essentials. Just the things that were mine. She was upstairs when I started. I didn't care if she noticed. I left the keys on the counter. The ones to the garage, the second car, the mailbox. Everything else was already shifted. Utilities transferred. Subscriptions canceled. The bank account split. Quietly. Legally. Without announcement. I didn't know an explanation for reclaiming what was mine. The apartment I signed the lease for was small, efficient. Not a new life, just a clean one. No pictures on the wall. No shared towels. No echo of her perfume in the sheets. I moved in the night before I told her. And even then, I didn't use words to explain myself. Just a single note. Folded on the edge of the bed we used to share. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't wanted. That was it. No signature. No plea for understanding. When she found it, I was already gone. I imagined she stared at it, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Because silence was the message. My exit wasn't about hurting her. It was about honoring myself. She called once. I let it ring. She texted a week later, something vague, nostalgic. I didn't reply. What do you say to someone who only noticed your value when it was no longer available? I wasn't angry. That was the surprising part. I didn't carry resentment. Just clarity. Because once you've been ignored enough, the silence becomes comfortable. You stop seeking warmth from someone who made cold feel normal. And when the door finally closes, you don't miss the echo behind it. People ask me if I'd ever take her back. I tell them the truth. You don't revisit places that taught you to forget yourself. Now, I wake up without weight on my chest. I move through my days without second-guessing whether I'm enough. There's peace in knowing you no longer live where love had to be begged for. There's freedom in becoming the version of yourself that never needed to ask twice. She stayed in the same house, same routine, same mirror. But now, when she looks into it, she sees absence. Not because I vanished, but because I finally chose not to stay. And in that silence, her own decisions speak louder than anything I ever could have said. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.